This is the first generation Gerber Avalanche toilet, introduced around circa 2005. Now I do recall one being from around 2004, but this was a few years ago and I don't really remember it that well, so take that with a grain of salt. This generation would be made up until 2010 in its original format. The trapway passages would be redesigned that year, and then it would continue until either 2011 or 2012. Now, for the purposes of this video, I'm going to be covering the original first generation, not the redesigned version. I'll cover that one separately as it is a bit worse for some reason. I feel like a lot of people don't really talk about this toilet all that much. And here's my proposition. Is this toilet secretly underrated? Let's find out. The overall design of this toilet actually doesn't look too bad. It's kind of fancy in a way, with some of its design choices. The trapway passages on the standardized versions are a little bit different. As you can tell, it's a generic trapway passage. On the 88 versions, it's a bit different. It's a little bit more zigzag, which is very weird. So I don't know why the trapway passages on the standardized versions are different. And I'm not so sure about the round ones either. The trapway opening is this trapezoid shape with a siphon jet towards the bottom. So this is not your average avalanche tank. As you can tell, this is a 14-inch model, which explains the fat tank and why it looks so weird. But the tank parts are pretty simplistic. You got a handle, which obviously has been replaced. You got a fluid master fill valve, and you got a base with a 3-inch flapper. That's right, a 3-inch flapper. This has been a staple on all generations of Avalanche so far. That way, it offers a stronger flush and drains the tank a lot faster. Let's have a look at a flush. Not bad at all. I like how powerful it is. So the pulling and siphon power is actually not bad at all. As you can tell, it's quite powerful. The pull is actually built into the flush, and the siphon is fairly long. So therefore, it clears out the bowl with no problems most of the time. There may be some tiny hiccups from time to time depending on which one you have, and especially as the quality kind of depleted a little bit later with the redesigned versions, and even some of the earlier versions. The siphons can be a little bit inconsistent, but generally speaking though, they are pretty long, so that doesn't really have to be a worry. Overall, not bad at all. Performance-wise, this thing is very interesting. Personally, never had any problems with these at all. But I will admit some of the earlier versions did have some slight performance issues. Not anything horrible or anything, but definitely a little bit lacking. And of course the redesigned version performed a little bit worse, but that's a review for a later day. For the original first generation, performance for the most part is okay. I expected it to be a lot better, honestly. Now let's have a look at ball rinse. Honestly, it's not bad. You can tell that some of the front rim jets are a little bit quirky and the quality control could definitely be a lot better there. But overall, the angled rim jets actually cover the ball pretty well. And the ball necessarily isn't too deep compared to like the second generation. So therefore the ball rinse is not bad at all. Here's another angle. And that's the first generation Gerber Avalanche toilet. A very underrated and kind of forgotten toilet. Considering this is a 1.6 gallon toilet from the 2000s, it's actually pretty solid, dare say fairly good. Is it a 10 out of 10 toilet? Absolutely not. It does have some slight issues, but compared to the competition, this thing is really underrated and not bad at all. But let's put this toilet into the grading scale. Let's grade it. I really like the overall design of this toilet. It's basically somewhat fancy without going too overboard. I quite like it and I give it a 7. For the most part, the tank parts are pretty simplistic, except for the fact that this thing has a 3-inch flapper, which means you have to get a specific flapper if you need to replace it. So it's a little less simple than usual, but not too far off. Although because of that, I'm dropping it to a 6. Quality control for the most part is okay. There are some aspects which may drag it down, like some inconsistent performances with some of the earlier ones, as well as some weird rim jets every now and then, though mostly towards the front, which you most likely won't notice. Overall, I give it a 6. Could be a little bit better. The trapways are somewhat inconsistent for some reason. Then again, this is Gerber, so that isn't really shocking. With the standard height models, from what I've noticed, it's just a generic trapway passage. But with the 88 versions, it's this weird zigzag pattern which I don't really care for. It just looks a little bit rough. Overall, I give it a 5. I really like the flush on this. It's very strong, very powerful, and doesn't waste too much time. It gets straight to the point. It's kind of like an Ingenium flush, but a little bit more powerful. I give it a 7. I like it a lot. The pulling and cipher power of this toilet is actually quite decent. The pull is actually pretty well built into the flush and it's very strong, and the siphon tends to be pretty long too. Honestly, you might be surprised at what this thing can accomplish. I give it a 7. The performance is probably the weirdest part. Now personally, I've never had problems with these and they always do pretty well. But sometimes the earlier versions can be a little bit inconsistent with performances, mostly the mid-2000s models. Outside of that, these things can perform pretty well, but the early ones do drag it down to a 6. The ball rinse is not bad at all. Since the rim jets are angled and they are applied pretty well, it does have some fairly decent ball rinse. I feel like some of the areas could have been slightly improved though, but overall it's not bad at all, which is why I'm giving the ball rinse a 7. Survivability is quite strong with this toilet. These things can last a very good long time, and I think a lot of people underestimate these toilets. I give it a 7. Now let's talk about the overall value of this toilet. Let's go back to my original question. Is this toilet underrated? I certainly think so. I think a lot of people really sleep on this toilet, and it really shows. This thing has some fairly decent stats, like a powerful flush, decent bowl rinse, and pretty solid pulling and siphon power. I do wish that the performance was a little bit more consistent though, because there was a lot of potential here, but it is what it is. That's basically my slight problem with this toilet. But outside of that, this toilet is pretty solid, and that's why I'm giving it a value at 7. The final score of the first generation Gerber Avalanche toilet, the original trapway design at least, is a 65 out of 100. This toilet is actually a lot better than most people let on about. This thing has some fairly decent stats and holds up fairly well. Could there have been some slight improvements? I think so, but overall, it's not a bad toilet at all, and dare I say, somewhat underrated.